Your child is not being difficult. They're not manipulating you. They're not spoiled. And you are not failing as a parent. What's happening at your dinner table every single night has a name. It has a biological explanation. And once I walk you through what's actually going on inside your child's body and brain, I think you're going to feel something shift. Not just understanding, relief. I'm Dr. Ayla, and this is exactly the kind of conversation I have with parents in my office every week. The ones who come in looking exhausted. Not from lack of sleep, from the weight of worry. From wondering if their child will ever eat a vegetable. From the guilt of serving plain pasta for the fourth night in a row just to avoid the meltdown. From the fear, quiet and persistent, that something is wrong with their child, or worse, with them. You deserve answers. Real ones. Not try a star-shaped plate. Not keep offering, they'll come around. Today I'm going to give you the actual science of why some children eat only for foods, and more importantly, what you can do about it that will actually work. Here's where I want to start. And I need you to really hear this, because it changes everything. When a child refuses food, when they gag at the smell of something new, when they panic at a texture, when they will only eat the same for things no matter how hungry they are, that is not a behavior. A problem. That is a neurological one. And in many cases, it's also a gut problem. These two things are connected in a way that modern medicine is only beginning to fully understand, and most parents, and honestly, many pediatricians, have never been told about it. There's a system in your child's body called the gut-brain axis. Think of it as a two-way telephone line between your child's digestive system and their brain. Messages travel constantly, up and down all day long. And when that line gets disrupted, when the gut bacteria are out of balance, when inflammation is present, when the vagus nerve isn't functioning the way it should, the messages that reach the brain become distorted. One of those messages is appetite. Another is safety. And a third, and this is the one that surprises most parents, is sensory tolerance. Let me explain that last one, because it matters enormously. Most people think sensory processing is about hearing or touch. About the child who can't stand loud noises or scratchy clothing labels. And yes, that's part of it. But sensory processing also governs how your child experiences food. The texture of cooked carrots. The smell of onions in a sauce. The way mashed potato feels in their mouth, soft and yielding in a way that some children's nervous systems register not as pleasant, but as genuinely alarming. This is called sensory processing sensitivity around food. And it's far more common than most parents realize. Studies suggest that somewhere between 50 and 80% of children who are classified as extreme picky eaters, the ones eating only 4 or 5 foods, have some degree of sensory sensitivity that is neurologically driven. Not chosen. Not performed. Not a phase. Their brain is telling them that new food is dangerous. And their body is responding accordingly. Now here's the part that I want you to stay with me for. Because what I'm about to tell you connects the gut to the brain in a way that most parents have never heard before. And it explains why the approach most families try, the one where you hide vegetables in sauces, or reward eating with dessert, or take away the plain pasta, until they try something new, not only doesn't work, but can actually make the problem worse. Here's something that stopped me in my tracks the first time I read the research on this. Scientists have discovered that approximately 90% of the signals traveling along the vagus nerve, that communication highway between the gut and the brain, travel upward. From the gut to the brain. Not the other way around. Let that sink in for a moment. That means your child's gut is not just digesting food. It's actively shaping how your child's brain perceives the world. Including how safe or unsafe a new food feels. Including whether the smell of something unfamiliar triggers calm curiosity, or genuine panic. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Inside your child's gut, there are trillions of bacteria. We call this the microbiome. And these bacteria, and I know this sounds almost impossible, actually produce neurotransmitters. The same chemicals your child's brain uses to regulate mood, anxiety, and sensory response. Serotonin. Dopamine. GABA. Around 95% of your child's serotonin, the calming, feel-good chemical, is produced not in the brain, but in the gut. So when your child's gut microbiome is disrupted, which can happen from a round of antibiotics, from a bout of stomach illness, from a diet that's been limited for a long time. The production of those calming chemicals drops. And what happens when a child has less serotonin available? Their anxiety rises. Their sensory sensitivity increases. New foods become even more threatening. The circle tightens. This is why picky eating so often gets worse after illness. You've probably noticed this. A child who was already selective suddenly becomes even more rigid after a stomach bug or an ear infection. Ted with antibiotics. That's not a coincidence, that's biology. And here's the part most parents, and honestly most doctors never connect. When you try to push through that biological resistance with pressure, with rewards, with hiding vegetables in sauces, you're not retraining the brain. You're activating the stress response. And a child eating under stress is a child whose vagus nerve is in fight or flight mode. Which means their gut is even less able to process new foods comfortably. Which means the sensory alarm gets louder. Not quieter. You didn't create this cycle. But understanding it is how you start to break it. Now, I want to talk about something called the neophobia window, because this is one of those things that I genuinely wish every parent knew from the very beginning. Between the ages of about 2 and 6, most children go through a period of food neophobia. Neophobia simply means fear of new things. And from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes perfect sense. When humans were foraging for food thousands of years ago, a toddler who ran toward every unknown berry and put it in their mouth was a toddler who didn't survive very long. So nature built in a fear response. A biological break. A voice inside the child's nervous system that says, new food, unknown food, potentially dangerous food. Wait. Be careful, refuse. This is completely normal up to a point. But in some children, particularly those with heightened sensory sensitivity, or an imbalanced gut microbiome, or a genetic predisposition toward anxiety, that neophobia window doesn't close on schedule, instead of naturally expanding their food range. As they approach school age, these children become more entrenched. The list of safe foods stays frozen, or shrinks. And the longer it stays frozen, the more the gut adapts to only those foods. The bacteria that help digest a varied diet begin to disappear, because they're not being fed. And as those bacteria disappear, the gut's ability to tolerate new foods decreases even further. Do you see how this works now? It's not stubbornness. It's a self-reinforcing biological loop. The gut shapes the brain's response to food. The brain keeps the gut limited to a narrow diet. And the narrow diet keeps the gut to compromise to welcome anything new. But here's what I want you to hold on to right now, because this matters. Loops can be interrupted. Biology is not destiny. And the way you interrupt this particular loop is not at the dinner table. It starts somewhere else entirely. And that's exactly where we're going next. If this is beginning to make sense to you, if you're sitting there thinking this is the first explanation that actually fits what I see in my child, do me one small favor. Save this video. Because you're going to want to come back to it. Share it with your partner, your child's teacher, even your pediatrician. What I'm about to walk you through in the next section is practical, it's gentle, and it works with your child's biology instead of against it. So let's talk about what actually works.